Hello, I'm Ros Atkins. Welcome to World Have Your Say on BBC World News. As I'm talking to you, hundreds of thousands of protesters are again out on the streets of Cairo. And after Thursday's will he go, won't he go, their most pressing question is how to get President Mubarak out of office. If you want them to succeed, do you think maybe now is the time to change tactic? Or if you agree with President Mubarak and his insistence that he stays in office until September, do you say to the protesters, thank you very much, you've made your point, you've helped our country, but now is the time to go home? We'll have live updates as well from Tahrir Square, and wherever you're watching BBC World News, if you've got questions or comments for Egyptians who are involved in this crisis, please do get in touch. Well, in a couple of minutes, we'll be speaking to some of you in London, Washington, D.C., Amman, and of course, Cairo. And wherever you are now, if you'd like to take part online, head to facebook.com/worldhaveYourSay and click the like button. But let's begin World Have Your Say with a look at the day's main developments. As I've already mentioned, hundreds of thousands of Egyptians are out on the streets in Cairo, voicing their frustration that Hosni Mubarak didn't resign in a televised address on Thursday. Vast numbers are gathered once again in Tahrir Square. Some estimates even put the number at 1 million. And thousands of those protesters are around the state television building and the heavily protected presidential palace. But the president's not in. A ruling party spokesman has confirmed that Hosni Mubarak has gone with his family to the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. Meanwhile, state television says that an urgent and important statement will be made shortly. Of course, we'll bring you that as soon as the broadcast begins. In other developments, Egyptian military leaders endorsed President Mubarak's transfer of powers to his vice president and his plan for a peaceful transition to democracy. The military high command guaranteed they would lift the 30-year-long state of emergency as soon as the current situation ends. It went on to say that constitutional changes will precede free and fair elections in September. And there's increasing international concern about the situation in Egypt, with Germany saying Mr. Mubarak's speech was not the step forward that it had hoped for and that it wouldn't ease tensions in the country. Britain has meanwhile described the situation as dangerous and called on the protesters to show restraint. Earlier, President Obama called the Egyptian government's moves insufficient. But in Tehran, the Iranian president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, has described the protests as a tide of awakening, and he declared that the Middle East will soon be free of the United States and of Israel. And in other news this hour, the war crimes trial of the former Liberian President Charles Taylor, which was due to end today, has now been adjourned. The defence lodged an appeal against the judge's decision not to accept the defence's written summary of the trial as it was submitted late. Well, let's begin our conversation with Mona, who joins us, speaking to us over the internet from Cairo. Mona, what's your view of what the protesters should do now?
That's a very difficult question. I don't think anyone can really answer that. I think they would hear the same things from different faces. But right now, it's the same old faces telling them the same thing. And actually, yesterday, the VP, it sounds like a threat more than anything else. It doesn't sound like a step forward to anything. I'm seeing maybe might be a military coup coming in.
But Mona, you're saying you're hearing lots of different voices in Egypt. What about your voice, though? What do you think the protesters should do? Should they go home, accept they have brought some change, and wait for September?
I think so. I think they're not going to get much further. I don't see it because I don't see it in any Middle East country. I do not see total democracy that will be coming to any country because you have a lot of leaders there that are just waiting to see, not waiting. I mean, they know if Mubarak gets toppled, the rest are a piece of cake. Kind of, sort of.
So you're worried about the knock-on effect. You're not positive about that. Some of our viewers do wait for that knock-on effect with anticipation and keenness. You're in Cairo, Mona. Let's bring in Khalid Abou Naga, who's an Egyptian actor and political activist. Khalid, thank you for joining us. Do you agree with Mona that the best thing here is for the protesters to go home and prepare for September?
Absolutely not. I'm afraid that people who are sitting on the internet and just getting their news from Facebook and Twitter are already being bombarded with messages from the propaganda machine of Mubarak regime. And I've got all these messages already. People who go on the street and see what's going on see that there is no turning back. This is not a protesters movement made by youth anymore. That was on the 25th of Jan. Now it's a full-fledged revolution in each and every corner in this country.
But Khalid,
talk to everybody and anybody, even those who are at home.
And as we're looking at you, we can also see live footage of Tahrir Square, hundreds of thousands, possibly 1 million people out today. You're saying this can't be reversed, this has to go on. But what does that actually mean? Does that mean more peaceful protests indefinitely, or will you be prepared to take violent action if need be?
No, no violence. This is a peaceful revolution. Started the first day saying سلمية 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 شعبية 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 عدالة اجتماعية حرية. These are the slogans of the revolution. It started from the 25th of Jan. It will stay the same. The Mubarak regime is betting that it should at some point, after all the frustration and pushing people to the edge, is to turn violent, and then chaos happens, and then they can divide people. And this is the way they rule. This is the way they ruled Egypt for 30 years, and this is the only way they know how to rule. This regime is hijacking this country, and this is the only way they know how to rule a country. What's happening right now is that people are so smart because they learn the methods of this regime, and they know better. They know that if we stop now, everything can go back. He is still a president. He can take away all the delegations he gave to his vice president. Everything can go back. He is protecting himself. The president, Mubarak, and his regime are protecting themselves from what's going on.
Let me jump in here, because you say you worry about what might happen if the president was to stay in power. Mona, you were making the case to us that the president should be allowed to stay until September, but why are you so confident he'll bring about these reforms which he's promising?
I'm not, I didn't say I'm confident. I'm just saying I don't know how much further they will achieve unless there maybe is a change of tactics. I did go down to Tahrir. It's not that I don't believe in it. I just don't know how much more they will gain. I don't see these millions of people going back home. I don't envision it.
Well, you say you don't see it in the future. We can see live footage there of Tahrir Square. Certainly, they're not going anywhere at the moment this Friday afternoon in Egypt. Now, Mona, you're in Cairo, as is Khalid. Let's bring in Egypt's finance minister, Dr. Samir Radwan, joins us on the phone. Dr. Radwan, we're told we're expecting an urgent statement from the presidency soon. Do you know what's going to be in that statement?
I have no idea.
What would you like to be in the statement? What do you think the president should say now?
I think we better wait and see what the statement will say. I think there is a process. I have listened to Mona. I have listened to Khalid. Khalid has, in fact, played in films which were prepared us for what has been happening, but people were not listening to him and his colleagues in his films. The message is received. There are very important. We are engaged in a very important process, but the main point for Mona and Khalid and all the loved ones in Tahrir Square is the following: let us steer this country into peaceful transition, and it will happen. It will happen. I'm sure it will happen.
Khalid, would you like a chance to respond to the finance minister?
Absolutely. I know that it will happen. It will happen because of those youth protesting since 25th of January. I know it will happen. I know that everything will be better. I have already I'm so proud of the youth and the revolution so far. I'm so proud of the Egyptian people. I know it will happen, Mr. Minister. And I know it will happen, Mona. We want to make sure it happens now. There is no point of postponing it. There is no point of listening to this rhetoric of the Constitution can't and can do.
Khalid,
it's all rhetoric.
Khalid,
These people
let
on
me
top of
interrupt
this
you a moment,
regime
Khalid.
must resign
Let me interrupt
now.
you a moment, because you're making a strong point. Dr. Radwan, why shouldn't these changes happen now? It would be quite possible for President Mubarak to stand aside and the Vice President to take over.
They are happening by the minute, but they are happening by the minute. But one of the most important things to Khalid and his colleagues is that while their movement has changed Egypt with no return, I repeat, with no return, but this it lacks the organization. We are only left with the opposition, which is not really a very bright scene. So I think, Khalid, you have a huge following in the country. You are a star. The people adore you. You get organized, and come to the negotiating table, because there are a lot of things for Egypt's future with you and your colleagues putting and insisting. Don't give up. Put your point of view, put it across, and don't give up. You have blown the whistle, and now you need to organize.
Well, Minister, you make a point about leadership. Here's an email from... Sorry for interrupting you, sir, but you're talking about leadership. Charles in the United States has emailed us to say the demonstrators' main problem is that they have no one who will assume the reins of government after President Mubarak leaves. Khalid, you're a high-profile member of this opposition, but who's actually going to lead the opposition if the president were to leave?
The beauty of this revolution is that it is leaderless. It's almost like a gene opened up and was triggered on in all and every Egyptian in this country. There's something very beautiful in this, and it is the strength. Now, talking about who will lead the country, there will be a void in the constitution, in the whoever running this country. This is all rhetoric. This is all rhetoric. The people lost trust in any icon of this regime, starting from Mubarak, Anas El-Fei, the guy who's running this building behind me, the TV building, which is still till now, changed their language a little bit, but they are still spreading rumors about still foreign agendas, you know, all these stupid lies they've been spreading, trying to create chaos, till today, till now. And until now, some young protesters are being detained from Tahrir Square. How can we trust this system if it's saying we are changing everything by the minute, everything is happening, we're doing whatever you want? Well, they're just doing the same things again to the people
Khalid, you make a very strong case for President Mubarak leaving now. You say you just can't trust them. I'm wondering, those of you watching BBC World News, wherever you are in the world, do you think Khalid's right? The president can't be trusted to oversee any sort of reforms. You can email us, worldhaveyousay@bbc.com, or you can call us. Let's bring in Sarah, who's on the phone from Cairo. Sarah, have you been protesting today? Sarah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Have you been protesting today?
I am, in a couple of hours.
And do you think that the protests need to change tactics?
I'm sorry?
Do you think the protesters need to do something different, maybe consider taking direct action?
I think what's happening is overwhelming, and I just think everyone should go down. People are useless at their homes. Everyone should go down. This is the time.
So that's interesting, Sarah. You're saying no direct action, we'll keep this peaceful, just as Khalid was saying. We just need to keep going down to town, going down to the centre, and in the end, President Mubarak will go. Sarah, we'll leave that there. Thank you very much. Thanks also to the Finance Minister of Egypt, Dr. Radwan, and all of our other guests. And do stay with us here on World Have Your Say. The BBC's World Have Your Say is a place where people come together to talk about the issues, events and experiences that matter most to them. It's live on BBC Radio, online, and now every Friday it's here on BBC World News. And while we may provide the platform, the issues that we discuss are the ones that you're already talking about. This isn't about us interviewing you, it's about you talking to people around the world.
A lot of the power of the programme comes from, say, a taxi driver in Moscow being able to talk to a farmer in Uganda about the same subject. We've taken the programme around the world to many different places. South Africa during the World Cup, we were in Beijing during the Olympics, and we were in Haiti immediately after the earthquake.
Foreign aides need to know that there has always been corruption in this country. make sure everything is distributed the right way.
Right people.
I'm hoping that World Have Your Say on the TV will recreate the atmosphere of the radio and the online site, a gathering together of people around the world to talk in a civilized atmosphere and share ideas and experiences.
These guys are our brothers and sisters, and they have nowhere to go. They have made mistakes along the line in the past. We just have to forgive them.
We want to make World Have Your Say as accessible as we possibly can, so we're not short of contact details. You can phone us up now. The number's country code 44 2070 83 72 72. Of course, we're on Facebook and Twitter as well. Our email is worldhaveyoursay@bbc.com, or you can text us from anywhere on country code 44 7786 20 60 80. And we know that some of those contact details aren't the snappiest, but don't worry, they're all at worldhaveyoursay.com. We're looking forward to hearing from you. You're watching World Have Your Say on BBC World News. A reminder, we're expecting an urgent statement from the presidency in Egypt. We don't know what that statement will refer to or contain, but as soon as it's released and made public on state television, we'll of course bring it to you here on BBC World News. Still with us in Cairo is Khalid Abou-Nagar, the Egyptian actor and political activist. We're also going to be speaking to Michelle Dunn from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Washington, D.C. in just a moment. But first of all, let me bring in Amir, who's with us live from Amman in Jordan. Amir, do you think that the protesters should change their tactics?
My opinion, I think the protesters should stay as they are. They're doing an amazing job sticking to their goals as they had when they initially started this whole protest. They want to see a change, and I think they're going to see this change if they stick to the way that they have been protesting for the past 18 days. So I assume they should stay the way they are doing.
Michelle, come in on this. Good to have you on World Have Your Say. What's your view?
Well, I think if the protesters were to do what Vice President Suleiman has called on them to do and to go home, then I agree with Khalid that I'm sure we would see backsliding even on what has been promised so far by Suleiman, and I doubt we would see a real process of change. I think we would see the same regime continue to be in place, perhaps with Mubarak in a more marginal role, Suleiman in control, and perhaps some limited amendments to the Constitution that would liberalize election processes slightly, that sort of thing. But I am convinced that if the demonstrations don't continue, that there wouldn't be real serious and irreversible change.
And all of you, earlier we heard from Khalid saying the fact that this movement, this opposition has no leader is a strength rather than a weakness. Amir, is that your view?
That this opposition has no strength?
That it has no leader. Is that a good thing? Does it give it strength?
That it has no leader, this might not be a good thing, but what I'm seeing that the Egyptian people on all levels and all ages, they're all uniting in one hand. I assume if they continue this and they continue to unite in the way that they are, they will be able to collectively decide on a leader.
Michelle, what's your view of the leadership issue?
Well, you know, I think that it's been misportrayed a little bit, you know, how leaderless this is. I don't think I mean, there is not any kind of single opposition leader. One of the strengths of this uprising or revolution, as it's now becoming, is that it's non-ideological. But I do think there is a very clear shared agenda. The demands of the protesters have been very clear. There are three things they've been asking for consistently: Mubarak leave office, lift the state of emergency, and dismiss the parliament. None of those three demands has been met clearly. And then, you know, we are seeing, I think, some new leaders emerge from the youth movements. We're seeing new figures rising to prominence. And some of the older figures, the figures that have been around a little while, like Mohammed al-Baradei, or movements that have been around a long time, like the Muslim Brotherhood, are still quite relevant here.
And Khalid, let me tell you, I was in Jakarta a few days ago with World Have Your Say, broadcasting on BBC World Service Radio. And when we spoke to people there, they said one of the big mistakes that Indonesia made in '98 was that once the opposition had driven General Suharto from power, they all went back to their jobs. They didn't become politicians, and that this left a vacuum. Do you think you might go into politics?
What happened here is beyond any other revolution. I think this is going to go into history, and it's going to be, many lessons will be learned from this. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. It's almost like a secret gene was triggered, and every Egyptian knows what to say, how to say it, when to say it, without having any kind of communication. We had a communication blackout,
Khalid,
for God's sake, and we had millions in the streets.
Khalid,
what's happening right now is that
Khalid, that doesn't actually answer the question. That doesn't answer the question that I asked you, though. If people like you don't go into politics, who is actually going to lead your country? Who is going to create the new Egypt which you're describing?
I am so sure there is hundreds and maybe thousands of leaders that can emerge from this. Every day you can see them talking on the phone on maybe me, maybe others. But that's not important right now. What's important right now is that everybody is united under these demands from day one. And the demands are going to increase because in the beginning, if the Mubarak regime moved faster on the 25th of Jan, maybe they could have saved this crisis. But actually, they're always delayed by 2 or 3 days. Right now, I think they're in a very bad situation. And every hour passing, they are in a deeper problem. Now, people learning about the billions, the icons like Habib al-Adli and Mubarak's family has, and they're public servants. Okay. Unheard of. It's unheard of in Egypt to have such billions.
I don't think
people
Khalid,
are now demanding more.
Khalid,
they're demanding questioning what's going on.
I don't think whether people agree with you or not, they can deny that you are inspired. And one of the things which inspired people in Egypt was what happened in Tunisia. Amir, in Jordan, I'm wondering whether you're feeling inspired by what's happening in Cairo.
Inspired in terms of what exactly?
In terms of trying to change your country and change the way it's governed.
To be honest, Jordan is governed in a very nice way. We're living in a monarchy. At the same time, we're in a democracy. We have freedom of speech, freedom of thought. We're living in a very peaceful country, economically, socially, financially. Do we need a change in Jordan? Not really. We're just experiencing currently a financial obstacle. And I think the whole world is basically watching this and seeing this because we're in a world recession. We don't need a change in Jordan. I think Jordan is one of the most peaceful countries in the Middle East.
Amir, many thanks for joining us from Amman. Good to have you on World Have Your Say. I hope we speak to you again. If you're watching this and want to get involved online, you can go to facebook.com/worldhaveyoursay or on the blog worldhaveyoursay.com. You can text and phone as well. All of the details scroll along the bottom of the screen as the conversation goes along. So if you didn't jot it down, then don't worry, it'll be along very, very soon. Well, let's bring in another guest now. Dr. Ahmed Fahmy is one of the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood in the UK, and he joins us in London. Sir, thank you for your time. Do you still wish the protesters well, and do you think they're right to remain peaceful?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there is no doubt that the protesters will continue as much as they can in a peaceful way, and that's their right to change the government and the regime. It is not the question of saying they have some demands and the demands are met. They are saying we need a change of the entire regime, means every piece or every tool that was there belonging to the old regime need to be dismantled and replaced with a democratic, free-form government at the moment, taking the people to the freedom that they want, at the same time fulfilling their desires. And we can see that the problem is not some youth here or there, like maybe people trying to portray them angry and so on. Today in Egypt, there are at least 14 million people marching all over different parts of Egypt, all demanding one demand, their rights to be human beings, and to be respected.
It's proving incredibly difficult to estimate the number of people protesting, but just a moment ago you'd have seen live footage from Tahrir Square. Certainly the crowds out today number in the hundreds of thousands. One estimate is putting it at 1 million. We still have Michelle Dunn in Washington, D.C. and Khalid Bolnaga, an actor and activist in Cairo. And maybe Michelle first, what point would you make to our guest from the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, I think that he's right, that the demonstrators are looking for some sort of a profound break with the past. They've put forward these 3 specific demands that I mentioned, and they said that they would be willing to talk, you know, after that about a transition to real democracy. this has been the core of the problem, that President Mubarak and also Vice President Suleiman are unwilling to make this fundamental break with the past. They've also been unwilling to really bring the opposition or those representing the demonstrators into the process of negotiating what this transition is going to be. Vice President Suleiman has held so-called negotiations, but they've only been with a few groups. The Muslim Brotherhood was one of them, and I understand that the groups that participated really did not feel they got much out of that. So there hasn't been a real sense of inclusiveness. There's one little piece of news today that Suleiman had instructed the Prime Minister to select a deputy Prime Minister from a group called the WHYS Men. This is a group of people from civil society and so forth who've been trying to mediate a bit between the demonstrators and the government.
Michelle?
So this is a little bit of a concession in that inclusiveness direction, but it's far short of what the demonstrators are looking for.
This is clearly a conversation we could carry on for a great deal of time. We can do that online, but for the moment, Khalid in Cairo, Michelle in Washington and Ahmed in London, we appreciate your time. And all of you watching, do remember you can carry this on at facebook.com/worldhaveYourSay.
نشرة تيجري توفيق